What's going on, y'all? Let's Be Real podcast, episode 15. As always, I'm here. We get the new episode today. And man, it's a good one for y'all. It's a good one, man. We got a lot of good stuff to go over. Obviously, we're going to recap the NFL from this last week. We're going to go into the Thursday night game that we got coming up here tomorrow. And then just a couple of those hot topics like we always do to end the show out. Look, as you know, as always, man, I got my red wine here. Little bit different. Look, I'm still finishing up with that cleanse, so it's the exact same bottle as we had last episode. So if you want the information on it, all that is in the last episode, but it is the Valle de Rosas. And so, like I said, Pinot Noir. But if y'all want to check out a little bit more about that one, that is right there at the beginning of last episode. And so you can find all the information there. Really good wine. If you like Pinot Noirs that are a little bit lighter, a little bit more balanced, I definitely suggest you check it out. And as far as the wine stuff goes, man, here in the next couple episodes, we'll have a new little wrinkle with it. And so good things on the horizon. But, man, to start off, we're going to hop into this NFL recap of Week 11. And we're going to start off with the Ravens and Steelers, man. And so big game there. Obviously, coming into it, one of the big question marks was how is Lamar going to perform here? And, man, it was a lot of the same from Lamar when it comes to the Steelers, looking a lot like a playoff game for him or a lot like a Kansas City game for him. And so, yeah, man, it's just – I don't know what it is. I thought that the defense played really well. Obviously, coming into that game, I think the only thing I had wrong was that I thought Russ was going to have a couple really, big plays on the outside because, the Ravens are prone to give those up this year. And to the Ravens defense credit, man, they played a good game. And, yeah, I mean, this one solely falls on Lamar and the coaching staff. And, man, it's like, again, man, we've talked about it before, but it's tough with the Ravens, man. It's, we're coming into week 12 and it's still like they don't know who they want to be. There's a stat out there that, when Derrick Henry runs the ball more than 20 times, they don't lose really. I think they've got one or two losses. And this goes back to his tenure in like Tennessee as far as the success they have, not the two losses, but just the success they have when he runs the ball more than 20 times. And again, man, it's just the type of runner he is. You got to give him those carries to let him just wear down the defense. And so, again, man, it's just I said it before. They fell down, I think one score early, maybe 10 points early, and it was like completely abandoned the run. And that's what they've been doing all year. It's just, they get down two scores, and it's like they feel like they just have to start throwing the ball when it's like you still got a whole game to go. And so, man, just again, going into week 12, not really knowing the identity of your football team and your offense, to me, just that's a recipe for disaster. And again, against good teams, it's just not something you can do. It's not a sustainable way to win. And so, as far as from the Ravens' perspective, you just got to figure it out. Obviously, you have this quarterback in Lamar who's shown, he is just a phenomenal player, and he was having a phenomenal year. But this point was brought up, and I'm going to bring it up as well. If going back to the Chiefs game and this year, right? If your best chance to win a football game is to not have it in your quarterback's hands, that quarterback can't be the MVP. The MVP of your team is Derrick Henry, because that team goes as Derrick Henry goes. Yes, Lamar's had some big nights. He's got great stats, but as we've seen, when it becomes a pass game, and granted, Lamar's taken strides, and since he came into the league, as far as a passer, he's gotten to where he's a good passer. But the success of that team hinges on Derrick Henry, much like the Eagles. The Eagles' success of that team hinges on Saquon Barkley. And so I think this last game probably takes it, in my opinion, takes Lamar out of the MVP race. One, just because their record, I don't think they're going to win the division now. And so a wild card team, MVPs don't typically come from a wild card team. But from a team perspective, again, man, it's just you're in week 12. You can't be kind of going back and forth on what kind of team you're going to be and how you're going to run your offense. And it's shown successful that when you run it through Henry, good things happen. And so on the flip side of it, man, the Steelers, again, man, look, I thought their offense was going to come out and put it on the Ravens. But, man, Russ, one of the worst interceptions of the year. And just offense didn't really get going. But that defense, man, that defense is something serious. And so when I look at these two teams, it's kind of a weird situation, right? Because all year I've been saying that the Ravens are probably the most dangerous team in the league, or one of the most dangerous teams in the league, and I wouldn't want to play them on a week-to-week basis. And the Steelers, you kind of came into this season with zero expectations. It's like, oh, this might be the season that Tomlin doesn't continue that winning season streak. And, they bring in Justin Fields and Russ. And Russ, again, bad game. This was the kind of games I thought he was going to have more of than these earlier games where he just didn't look good. But finding ways to win and atop the division, hard to see them not winning the division now. And so when you really look at it, man, as far as going into the playoffs, the big question that I was kind of going back and forth with is which of these teams is an actual contender, right? Because on one hand, you have to weigh, okay, like, yeah, the Steelers have this incredible defense, but you've got Russell Wilson, who do I trust him to play top level quarterback in the playoffs? And do I trust that offense to play top level offense in the playoffs? But then on the other side, you got the Ravens, where it's like they might go down a touchdown in the first drive of the game, and Derrick Henry might end the game with 12 carries. And that defense, while they played well, has been exposed a lot this year. And then you got the Lamar playoff struggles. And so when I look at it, man, it's kind of funny to say that a team with Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and the weapons they got, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, and how dangerous and explosive they've looked, I can't view them as a true contender anymore. Just because, like I said, you don't know who you are on offense, and that coupled with the Lamar struggles in the playoffs, I can't trust that you're going to ride Derrick Henry through the playoffs and just have Lamar kind of make it easy for Lamar. I think you get down that one score and then you're going to try to put the superhero cape on Lamar and he's going to go play off Lamar. And so when I look at him, Steelers to me are more of a contender. But again, it's hard for me to really trust Russ. And so when we look at that AFC North, man, where, coming into the year, we probably thought that might be a 3 playoff team division, 3 of the best teams in the league, at least 2, not the 2 we would have thought. But I can't see, with the Bengals being pretty much out now, we'll talk about them in a little bit. I just don't see a real true contender for a Super Bowl, at least, in that division. Just because there's such glaring weaknesses that each team has. And so, we'll see how the season ends up, man. I think the Steelers, like I said, probably end up winning this division. And the Ravens they're going to win games. And I wouldn't be shocked if they have a couple games in the next few weeks where they come in and they blow out whoever they're playing and they look like, the Ravens that we saw, earlier this year and last year that are just, you look at them thinking, okay, how can they be beat? But it's always just going to roll down to, I don't think they know who they are, and I know who Lamar is. And so, we'll kind of see how that division plays out. But yeah, my thoughts on it are, I think the Steelers obviously take that division, and no real contenders in that AFC North. But moving on, man, let's go to the NFC North. We had a showdown up there. two young QBs. We have Packers and Bears. And man, the last few weeks have just been a complete just referendum on the Bears coaching staff. So we're going to start on the Bears side, man. Look, first off, we'll go positives. You got the new OC in there. Caleb looked a lot better. No 3-and-outs the whole game. Looks like they made it easier for him, gave him those easier reads, let him kind of go more off script, it looked like, with running the ball. He had 70 yards on the ground. And so letting him use his athleticism and then just making things easy. So I don't know as far as what was happening with that previous OC, what if it was, they wanted him to, be extremely careful with the ball, not get out, not really run too much, try to make multiple reads. Whatever it was, looks like a totally different quarterback in this new offense, granted in just 1 week. Look, and then led a drive in the end of the game, gets them in position to win that game against the Packers, which, look, they win that game, and that division outside of the Lions, man, it's who knows who's coming out of there. You got the Lions, the Vikings, Packers, Bears, and Packers win or Packers lose that one, Bears win it. That division can start getting shaky depending on what Sam Darnold looks like down the stretch. And so, but that's where we're going to lead as far as with this Bears coaching staff, right? And the decisions there at the end of the game, and kind of why I think these last few weeks, I think, have basically solidified the fact that Eberflus is going to be out. There's too many blunders. There's too many just bad coaching mistakes that have led to losses for me to think that he's got any sort of job security or any reason to think that he's going to be coaching the Bears week 1 of next year. And so coming down to it, man, like, if you heard the Packers team and their defensive players after that game and what they were talking, so obviously the Bears, you have a chance to run a few plays, even if you run the ball, but get a couple more yards for your kicker. Reason why that is so important is the Packers came out on that field goal unit and said, oh yeah, we had noticed all game and in film that this kicker, he's got a low trajectory on his longer kicks. So obviously a low trajectory makes that a lot easier for you to kick. Apparently Chicago's coaching staff did not know that, because not only did they just go extremely, like, they went as conservative as you could ever possibly go and settled for a long 40-yard field goal, which, yes, we see guys hitting regularly from, long 50s, but a long 40, almost 50-yard field goal is anything but a guarantee in the NFL, as we've seen, not to mention the fact that your kicker has a tendency on longer kicks like that to have a low trajectory. And so, to me, again, it all started from that Hail Mary against the Commanders. It's just been, again, just a total snowball effect of bad coaching from the Bears. And so that's the reason why, I'm surprised he's lasted this long. Again, we talked about it before in a few episodes with a couple of those other ridiculous losses or quotes coming out of the locker room, as far as I didn't think they should have came into the year with him. I thought they should have cleaned house, set Caleb up with a new head coach that could kind of grow with him. So that way, now you're talking about year 2 for Caleb, year 2 second head coach, second OC, maybe third OC. And so totally just, I think the Bears front office dropped the ball on this in that respect. And then also just, yeah, it's just coaching staff continues to drop the ball week after week. And so when we go to the other side, though, Packers get the win in the playoff picture. And the biggest question coming out of that is, can they actually be true contenders like some people had them as this year if Jordan Love is your quarterback? And we've talked about it before, man, but to me, I don't think they can be. Maybe you win a playoff game, he gets on here, but with a quarterback who is just so sporadic and so prone to making bad plays and giving the other team the ball. Again, coming into this game, the Bears were reeling. Like, this should be a game the Packers come in, dominate, but Love throws an interception. And it's just these different things that lead me to think that, not saying that they'll never be, not saying you can't clean that up, but when I look at Jordan Love right now, that's not a quarterback that I could see, playing enough good football enough weeks straight to get to a Super Bowl, let alone win one. And so I can't put it on LaFleur because I've watched LaFleur, I've watched his offense with, Aaron Rodgers. Malik Willis comes in and wins games. Like, so it's clearly a Jordan Love issue as far as just making these bad decisions. And so, again, if you're the Packers, obviously you just paid him. And it's always good, like, everybody loves stability at the quarterback position as far as, like, you have a guy with talent. But unless that gets cleaned up, I think they may be right back into that quarterback draft here in a few years if this is the way Jordan Love continues to play, because I just can't see them being successful at a high level. And so we're going to stick in the NFC, man, stick to another divisional game. We got Seahawks and Niners. And, man, great game. Obviously an ugly game at times, but look, man, I said it last week, right before the game. I told y'all that this game was a must win for the Niners, and not only a must win, but like a must look good winning. Because even if they would have won this game, like say Geno gets stopped on that quarterback run, they don't get in the end zone. If the Niners would have won this game, I still would not have felt good about them. And so, again, just haven't looked good. And now I think we're at the point where it's not just one of those, they're going to get it together. Like, they are what they are. They are a middle of the pack football team. And look, Brock Purdy had a bad game. Ish. Wasn't good. We'll put it that way. And so when I look at just this team as a whole right now, it's, to me, I know they're not mathematically out of it, but it is far, far more likely that I see them not making the playoffs than even being competitive in a playoff game. And so, again, man, it's just at some point you have to take these teams as they are what they've shown you they are through 11 weeks. And that's the Niners, man. It's a lot like the Ravens. Like, I know everybody wants to, we all want to trick ourselves because of the past and what we've seen them do and how we've seen them look at times in a week. But at the end of the day, you are what your record is. Like, we're far enough into the season now where you are what you are. And it's not like, I mean, obviously, yes, they've got Ayuk's out for the year. But that, like, it's not like they've got they had a handful of injuries and now they're all coming back, and so they've got, like, you can maybe see them getting some momentum. Like, their team was there yesterday. Like, yeah, they've had CMC missing. Jordan Mason was running the ball great. CMC's back. They still don't look great. Now, is that, part of, maybe them trying to manage those Achilles? Maybe CMC's not the same player. Either way, again, I can't see that becoming better and them becoming a dominant football team again, at least not this year. And I think that brings us to our second question with the Niners has Purdy and the Niners with their play, has Purdy kind of played himself out of getting a contract this year? And so when I look at it, man, it's obviously coming into this year, I don't think anybody even thought about the fact that, I mean, I think I did, and there were others, I'm sure, but most people who follow the football, follow the Niners, I would have said most of them, they probably couldn't see a scenario where Purdy doesn't get paid this offseason. And now I think if you're the Niners, man, you still have him under contract another year. And then you got the franchise tags. I think now he with how he's played, with how the Niners have played, I I can't see him getting paid this offseason. It's just this is going to end up being Kyle Shanahan, one of, if not Kyle Shanahan's worst season without losing a starting quarterback to injury, and not going to make the playoffs. And so that's, look, say what you want about Kyle Shanahan in the playoffs or whatever you want. If there's one thing we've seen is that if he has his starting quarterback in, Jimmy Garoppolo, he makes the playoffs and they win games. And for Brock Purdy to be that first quarterback where it's like, look, he was healthy. And, yeah, he was missing one All-Pro this year, two All-Pros this year, but he still had another 3 on offense. That's a big indictment on Purdy. And again, if I'm the Niners, I wouldn't have paid him coming into the year anyways. I definitely wouldn't do it now. Now I would almost have to roll with it, let him play out the contract, franchise tag him. Like, it's just because you pay him and look, your team isn't even going to be as good as it is now. And so what does that look like moving forward? And so, again, I think more likely we see them end up out of the playoffs than anything. And I think Purdy, he's probably going to go into next year without a new contract. Or if they do, I could see him. I couldn't pay him more than, maybe like a Baker, maybe like 30 million a year, 32 over 4, something like that. Like, that's what I would pay him. And I don't think his agent's going to take that. And so, it's a tough spot. It's a tough spot. So we'll see how that plays out. And then, man, let's move on to what I thought the game of the week was. I'm sure a lot of people thought the game of the week was. And we're going Chiefs-Bills, man. And so two teams, obviously, that have Super Bowl aspirations. And one team that had, a little bit extra on the line as far as the Chiefs and that undefeated season. And we finally saw it happen, man. Chiefs lose. Look, I said it last episode. I personally think that loss is probably the best thing that could happen for them. One of the things, I'll go through some of the reasons I had said. Another one I'll take from somebody else that I heard during the game, actually. And so, as far as my thoughts on it is, look, having that undefeated season going in, I think if you get to that week 16 game or 17 game, I think if you're still undefeated, you almost have to go for it, right? To try to beat that undefeated season. Because as a coaching staff, as players, how do you say, okay, we're going to rest this game and lose the undefeated season if you have a chance at history? And so now I think with this loss, granted, this is all predicated on them still handling business as they move forward, right? And so now you look at that Christmas Day game, as long as you handle business, you should have the 1 seed pretty much locked up by then. And it kind of gives you that flexibility where I would rest everybody on that Christmas Day game. It's just it's the sandwich game on a 3-game in 10-day stretch. And so to me, one, I don't want my players playing 3 games in 10 days. Like in the NFL, absolutely not. Like terrible scheduling from the NFL, we've talked about it. And so I think now that you have that undefeated season like kind of wrapped, like that's done with, now there's nothing stopping you from resting those guys unless you get into a dogfight at this end of the year as far as for that 1 seed. And so I think good with that. Another reason I think is good is, again, losing to this team. Now, granted, you don't have that cushion, and this is going to kind of play into what I heard as well. But you don't have that kind of cushion anymore as far as from like the Bills, as far as going for that 1 seed. So now you still you got to get your stuff right. You got to do what you need to do over these next few weeks. And, obviously Bills have to do what they have to do, but Chiefs still have their own destiny in their hands. And so again, I don't think if you're the Chiefs, this is a game where it's not that bad, right? You lose to the Bills, which look, you've lost to them a few times over the last few years, all in the regular season, and it doesn't affect you in the playoffs at all. They've beat you a few times over the last few years, and it doesn't seem to give them a boost going into the playoffs against you at all. And so, from that standpoint, nothing to really worry about from the Chiefs' perspective, and nothing to really like be excited about from the Bills' perspective, except that you won a game. And so, with that, also in the game, Tony Romo said something where, and it kind of rings true, is if the Chiefs were to have won that game and been undefeated still, they almost basically lock up the 1 seed in mid-November, which means that there's not really very much. I mean, granted, you'd still have the undefeated season going, but there's not too much you're playing for as far as like importance of games for the rest of the year, which, I mean, you're talking about 2 months of football still. And so the kind of human nature of getting complacent when you've essentially locked up the 1 seed in week 11, I think would have been bad for them as well. And so shout out to Romo for making that point. I didn't even think of it, but definitely a great point. And so also something just from a standpoint of the Chiefs, I don't really know if they really were. I'm not going to say they weren't trying to win the game, but I don't think they really put out. I think they were trying things in that game. There was just there was a lot of stuff that just kind of didn't make sense. It looked like the Chiefs were really making like a concerted effort to get Worthy involved and make him like the premier like receiver for that game, which isn't typical. I think that, if you get this in a playoff environment, that's probably not the case. I think DeAndre Hopkins is more involved. Travis Kelce's way more involved. And so that was a little bit against the norm as far as like they were really targeting him a lot. The second point is like the defense, like they blitzed a lot less than usual. They didn't run a spy on Josh Allen, which is something they typically do in those playoff games that they've won. And so again, just some strange things where it's like, I know y'all are trying to win, but were you really trying to win? You know what I mean? And so, yeah, just some weird stuff. And then the kind of icing on it was, I think when you looked at the time in the game where fourth quarter, Bills kind of open the game up and it becomes like a Chiefs need to score now to stay in this game. We saw Mahomes march right down the field and they scored a touchdown quickly. And so to me, that says like, okay, you guys kind of started to feel like, okay, this is going to slip away if we don't get a touchdown here. So we need to go down and we need to score, obviously. And they just bang, 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 touchdown. And again, it's just one of those things where it's like, that's kind of what they've been doing all year is, they get into these positions where, the rest of the game's kind of going weird. And then they get to the fourth quarter and it's like, okay, it's time to win. Let's flip the switch. And then they just march down the field, score, march down the field, score, get a stop, and the game's over. And the Chiefs win. And so, again, it's just a lot of weird things that the Chiefs are kind of doing in that game that make me think that maybe the undefeated season, especially to them and the coaching staff, wasn't as important as maybe some of us thought it was to them, and that even they kind of looked at it as far as like losing this game might not be the worst thing for us. And it shows, look, it shows them that they can't just walk in any game and just figure out ways to win. Like most of the time they can, obviously, but eventually it's not going to work your way. And so I think that also just brings a sense of just kind of they need to get their everything in straight as they kind of finish out the back half of the season. And so, look, on the other side of the ball, the Bills played great. Look, their defense looked great. They got great pressure on the quarterback. Offense looked really good, even missing some of those weapons that we talked about before the game. Obviously they didn't have Kincaid out there, and missing and Keon Coleman. So missing two of your premier offensive pieces and still look good. And then look, Josh Allen did Josh Allen things. And it was games like that, where, and especially when you look at that kind of when it looked like the game was about to flip in the Chiefs, right? They have that 3rd and long. They get the stop there, and all of a sudden the Bills maybe kicking a field goal and up 6. It was either 3rd or 4th down, but either way, not a touchdown advantage for them. No matter if they get a field goal or if they would have been stopped, I can't remember exact downs, but Josh Allen puts on the Superman cape, gets that touchdown, and that's kind of when I said at the beginning of the year, that's I when I said at the beginning of the year I could see Josh Allen winning the MVP. That's kind of what I envisioned, because I thought he was going to have to do that just for them to be able to win games this year. Granted, he hasn't played, he hasn't had many mistakes this year, so he hasn't really had to put on the superhero cape because, I think the defense is a little bit better than we thought it was going to be coming into this year after losing those pieces. And the offense, they've got pieces, and bringing in Amari was one of those pieces where it was like that, the one thing they were kind of missing. And so, look, the Bills, I think this year is probably the most of a contender as they've ever been, I think. I think this year is probably the most dangerous Bills team going into the playoffs. And so, look, if we get into a playoff game, Bills Chiefs, am I going to pick the Bills? No. But do I think if the Bills got matched up with any other team outside of the Chiefs in the playoffs and somebody knocks out the Chiefs, do I think they can make it to a Super Bowl and win it? Absolutely. And so, look, again, I think Josh Allen's playing, he's playing some of the best football he has. Obviously, the stats aren't as eye-popping as they have been in times, but just he's been so much less likely to make mistakes, and just he's making these big, big plays when they need him to. And so for that, yeah, I think the Bills, I would probably have them as the second best team. I think I did when I did the top 5 this last week, but I think they were the second best team in the AFC. And now it's, I'd still have the Chiefs edging them out, but they tightened the gap between them. And so, man, moving on to another possible playoff team. We're going to stay in the AFC. We're going to finish it up with the Bengals and the Chargers, man. Look, another great game. And another heartbreaking game for the Bengals. And so, obviously you hate to see the Bengals kind of getting to a point where it looks like their season's probably done. But, it's kind of what it is. And look, the Chargers, credit to them, man. They did what they have to do. Harbaugh's got them playing incredible look, I had them at number 5 last week. I know they're not moving down. We'll see where they end up being at after, on Saturday when we do our top 5. But that team is nothing to play with. And so we're going to start off with the Bengals, man, just because we'll end on the high note. So that's the Chargers. But with the Bengals, man, I think the biggest thing for them, and I was talking with somebody about it last night, to me, if you look at that post game where they're asking Joe Burrow, they're asking Jamar Chase about, what do you say to the kicker after he's missed those two field goals, which, obviously that would have won him the game. And, both are answered. Joe Burrow kind of just nothing. And then Jamar Chase, it's, nothing. He's got to hit those field goals. That's why he gets paid. Just watching those interviews, to me, shows me that that's a team that is just broken. Like, that to me looks like a broken team. And so I made the prediction when I was talking to the guy I was talking to last night. Their next game is against the Steelers. I told him I didn't care who their next game was against. If they played this week, they're on a bye this week. But if they had played this week against anybody that's better than the Jets, I would have said that team is going to beat the Bengals, because they just look like a team whose spirit is just broken. And so with that, obviously they're not mathematically eliminated, but I just can't see them. I can't see them being able to rally past this to make a playoff run, which is unfortunate because now we're going to be in the playoffs. We're not going to see Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Joe Burrow, and Hendrickson. Look, if they had a better record and these guys had the same numbers, Joe Burrow would probably be MVP. Jamar Chase might be Offensive Player of the Year, and Trey Hendrickson might be Defensive Player of the Year. Like, they have arguably three of the top 15 players in football right now and are going to miss the playoffs. And it's unfortunate. But look, we talked about it earlier in the year. Bengals ownership, they got some decisions to make, and they're typically pretty cheap. And so I think this was going to be the last year as far as where they had a legitimate shot to contend, because now you're going to have to pay T. Higgins, and you're not going to be able to because you got to pay Jamar Chase, and Burrow's got paid. And, I think it might be some dark days ahead for the Bengals moving forward. And so sticking kind of – let's go with the Chargers, other side of the ball. Again, man, we talked about it. Harbaugh bringing just a whole different dimension to that team, who's bringing back a lot of the same pieces, and I would say is actually less talented on offense than they've ever been since Justin Herbert's come into the league. And just winning. Man, Harbaugh, that's what he does, man. He goes somewhere, he wins. He's got them playing tough football. They're running the ball great. The defense looks great. And when I look at this team, man, this Chargers team, again, outside of maybe facing the Chiefs in round one, I think this Chargers team's got a ceiling of they can probably win a game, and then depending on the matchup, 2 games in the playoffs. And so it wouldn't shock me to see them in possibly the conference championship game. Again, depends on the matchup. But I think outside of the Chiefs, I wouldn't be shocked at them beating anybody. And so, it's going to be interesting to see how they finish up the year, kind of how that playoff bracket falls. But they're going to be a team I'm going to keep my eye on the rest of the year, just because, again, I think they have a pretty high ceiling, and definitely higher ceiling than I thought they did coming into the year. And so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Or that is the full recap. We're going to touch on the Thursday night game barely because, look, Steelers-Browns, let's all agree, Steelers are probably going to win this game. The thing that I'm most interested to see is how Russell Wilson bounces back. After a game against a bad defense in the Ravens where he didn't look good, you're facing a team that's like the Browns. Their defense isn't what it was last year, but it's still a solid defense with some big-time playmakers on it. And so my biggest thing with this and what I'm watching for this is just how Russ and that offense looks. Because really that's going to be what either propels them or sinks them in the playoffs. And so, look, I haven't been a big Russ fan. I think this might be the game where we get kind of after last game, we look at this game and say, okay, is it time to go back to Justin Fields? I think that might start creeping in after this game, just because I think he's going to struggle in this game too. I think they're going to win, but I think he is going to struggle. And so, we'll kind of see how that works out. And so, man, let's go ahead. We're going to touch on some of the bigger topics of the week. Got some good ones, got some crazy ones. First one we're going to talk about is the Lions, man. And just, again, they come out against Jacksonville, granted, against Jacksonville and against their backup QB in Mac Jones. But, man, look, if there is a team that's going to come out and just absolutely annihilate a team that's not on their level, it is the Lions. They do not, man. If you're a bad team and you got the Lions on your schedule, I would say it's more likely you lose by 40 than 10. And so, man, look, they look great. Jared Goff got back to, playing perfect quarterback. And the biggest question with that is, when you look at the NFC, clearly they're the team to beat, but are they basically, you never want to lock in a team as like, oh, they're going to the Super Bowl this early because lots of things can happen. But when you look at the NFC, man, I don't know of any team that can really challenge them, that I trust to challenge them. Now, granted, you got, Jared Goff back there and, as great as he's been this year and as good as he's been at putting some of those stereotypes against him as far as, under pressure and things like that to bed, he still has a 5 interception game last week. And so that's still in there. Again, just he's probably their biggest question mark, that and the secondary. But again, man, it's just the only team I think in the NFC that I could really, really see giving them issues. I'm going to say two. One is the Eagles, and it's actually, for similar reasons. One is the Eagles, the other is the Vikings. And the biggest reason is both teams have wide receivers that can challenge that secondary, and both teams now are getting an incredible pass rush. And I think those are the recipes that if you're going to beat the Lions, that's what you got to do. But you also have to be great at stopping the run. And so, again, it's just they've shown that even if you stop Goff, he throws 5 picks, they can still win because they're that deep and that good. And so, again, I think I could see maybe the Eagles, possibly the Vikings. But outside of that, man, I think they're far and away the favorites to make the Super Bowl in the NFC. And it's one of those things where I kind of want to write them into the Super Bowl already, but in pencil. And so we'll see how they look the rest of the year going forward, how they look in the playoffs. But again, if they're playing like this, I don't think there's a team that can beat them. And then look, we're going to move to the AFC, and we're going to move to probably the most – it's great because the next two topics it's going to be about the two most dysfunctional, or I think they're probably the most two dysfunctional organizations in football. First one we're going to talk about is the Jets. We'll talk about the Cowboys next, but the Jets. And I thought pretty much the Jets were going to be done after, they basically locked themselves out of the playoffs and have been playing terrible. But right when you think that, okay, yep, we don't have to talk about the Jets anymore, more stuff comes out. And so, look, they fired Joe Douglas, which I don't think is a shock. I think they fired Sal earlier in the year, still playing bad. I think that's just kind of the next domino. He's been there for a while, and he's had some good drafts, he's had some bad drafts, but the team has been terrible. And part of that is, finding a quarterback, finding an O-line, and finding a head coach, which he hasn't been able to do any of those things well. And so probably had a longer leash than most GMs would, but he's out. And this comes off, look, right after that comes out, we get reports saying that Woody Johnson, the owner of the Jets, in week 4 came in to bench Rodgers and said that he wants him benched. And so, look, we're back to the clown show of the Jets. It is just crazy to me. Again, week 4, look, now I haven't been big on the Jets. I didn't think they were going to be a great team coming into the year. But week 4, they were 2-2 and they had the chance to still kind of win the division. They didn't look great, but they were in it. And so to almost give up in week 4 on your quarterback is, again, wild to me. And from all reports, it was the staff, the front office, all were like, no, we can't do that. And now it's looking more like, look, I've been critical of Rodgers. I thought he was the reason Saleh was out. I know he's the reason Hackett's there. But it's looking more and more like Woody Johnson is the one that, he's kind of showing he's in charge, whereas like the front office may have been catering to Aaron. Woody Johnson was not. And so, he was the one who went and fired Saleh without talking to Joe Douglas, which was probably the first kind of warning sign for Joe Douglas that he might be out the door. But again, you got just an owner making these decisions and wanting things done. And so moving forward, man, what it looks like is he's probably, and I can't take credit for this. I heard this, Nick Wright posed this, but it looks like he's trying to get his GM in, his head coach in, and do all that before he possibly has to hand over control of the team like he did before when Trump was in office. And so if that's the case, man, it's look for Woody, it's a win-win. You hired the people you want, hand over control of the team, you leave for 4 years, you come back. If the Jets win or the Jets are great, you come in like, you see what I did? I left you guys in great hands. I did all this. If it doesn't work out, he comes back in 4 years and you guys, it's okay. I'm back now. I know they really screwed up while I was gone. And so he's really just putting himself in a win-win situation with this. But again, just what a clown show over there, man. And if you're a Jets fan, I'm sorry. I mean, you're doing it to yourself because you're a Jets fan, but you finally get a glimmer of hope and you still have Woody Johnson as your owner. And look, we're going to stick with the dysfunction because we're going to the Cowboys. And so, look, man, another just terrible outing. And, we go from, where they were at coming into the year, where they are at now. And look, when I look at it, it's simple. One, Jerry Jones, you got to hire a GM. That's not going to happen. But it's just Jerry Jones, man. The reports now is that they're looking at getting Deion Sanders as the head coach and drafting Shador. And to me, the most idiotic thing you could do. And look, I love Deion. Anybody who's listened to me talk about Deion as far as the head coach and Shador as far as the quarterback knows, I love them. I think like they're incredible. But it's just that doesn't fit with the Cowboys. And so, first of all, it means you got to get a top pick, which, I mean, could happen because you guys are terrible. But also, when you look at it, it's just, man, you're talking about it's already a circus there. And then you make that hire, you draft him, and you got Dak there. And Dak, I mean, he's got his $60 million kicks in next year. He hasn't even, $60 million a year kicks in next year. His contract hasn't even started yet. And he's got a no trade. And so if you're Dak, if they hire Deion, they draft Shador. If you're Dak, they can't trade you unless you okay it. And if I'm Dak, I'm not okaying it. No, what you're going to do is you're going to have to cut me so you can take that $90 million, $100 million cap hit, dead money cap hit next year, and I'm going to go sign with somebody. And I'm doing what Russell Wilson did, right? I'm going to go sign with somebody for the minimum. Dallas, you're going to keep paying. Because, look, if I'm any team that's willing to trade for me, I'll sign with when they cut me, and they won't have to give up assets for me. So it means my team is going to be better positioned, and I'm sticking it to the Cowboys. So, again, it makes no sense. Everybody was talking about this. Oh, we need to get – the Cowboys need to draft Shador. It is just – it's not living in a place of reality. The Cowboys' issues are not at the quarterback position. Granted, I'm not the biggest Dak fan, but he has won 12 straight games – or he's won 12 games the last 3 years. He was in the MVP race last year. Like, he's not the biggest issue in Dallas. The biggest issue in Dallas is they have no one outside of him, CeeDee Lamb, Micah Parsons. And then, like, they got Diggs, Ferguson. But outside of that, they got nothing. And so if they were smart, what they would do is, like I pitched last week, is take your top pick, trade back, get more picks, go stack this team up with good young talent, because that's what you're going to have to do with a $60 million quarterback. What I'm afraid they're going to do is hire Deion, draft Shador, because that's the splash move. It's not the smart move. And Jerry's more interested in the Cowboys in the headlines and the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl. And so for my Cowboys fans, I'm not going to say I'm sorry because I'm an Eagles fan, and I hope you guys stay there where you're at. So last few things, man, we're going to touch on basketball real quick. Look, we're going to start 76ers. I was talking to somebody today about it, man. As somebody who's defended Joel Embiid a lot, I can't defend him with this. And so came out, they had a team meeting after this terrible start where Maxey came out and basically said, look, Joel Embiid is late to everything. And when I'm picturing late to everything, that means everything. Bus to the game, bus to the airport, plane to go wherever, because they're not going to leave him. And again, look, I get it. I don't get it, but I can understand if you don't want to be first in the gym, last out of the gym. Some people just aren't wired like that. I understand if you don't want to do that, but to be late is inexcusable when you are a professional athlete. That is just inexcusable, especially when you talk about wanting to win championships and want to be the best player in the league. Like that's not what that says. And so, look, to me, this season, the only thing that is the saving grace on the Sixers year so far is that the East is so bad that even at 2-10, they can go on a little run and they're right back in the playoffs. But outside of that, man, bright spot has been McCain. He's been balling, but again, man, it's just sad to see, man, because Joel Embiid, obviously, with all that talent and just to have that mentality is inexcusable. And lastly, man, we're going to finish up here with the Lakers. Just had a game. And look, Dalton Knecht, man, look, I said it when it came out, that was the steal of the draft. Because, I know the reason he got passed up because, he's an older player. And, he's early 20s. I think he's 22, 23, whatever it is. And, NBA is all about, well, we want to get this young talent that we can get. But this is the perfect player to fall and the perfect team to get him. Because when we look at the Lakers, obviously LeBron, we've seen over the years, he does not like playing with younger players. So when you draft a guy who's older, NBA ready, who's a catch and shoot guy, man, if I was ahead of the Lakers in the draft, I would have almost drafted him just so the Lakers couldn't get him because he is the perfect draft pick for that team. And it just goes to show you, man, look, I was talking today with Joey, who y'all have seen on the podcast, man, but the age thing to me is totally overrated, man. The difference between a 19-year-old and a 22, 23-year-old, 3-4 years, but you're going to lose a year or two of that in that 19-year-old who's raw, getting the skills that a Dalton Knecht has. And then what? Instead of having him for 12 years, you have him for 10. Okay. Look, what I know is Dalton Knecht is going to be a player who's going to contribute to winning right now. And he's got a game that, granted, he is sneaky athletic. He's gone up to dunk on some people. I think he tried to challenge Rudy Gobert and dunk on him. He's got some bounce. He's got some explosiveness. But his game is he can shoot the ball and he can score at every level. And something that's not going to age poorly, as we've seen with guys like, I don't know, maybe like their head coach, JJ Redick. You can play a long time in the league if you can hit a three-point shot. And you can come off screens and shoot. And that's something he can do. So, man, look, I think I love that pick for the Lakers coming out. I think it's a perfect pick for them. And I think, look, they're looking good. If they can keep playing like this and he kind of emerges as, their third, fourth on some nights best player, man, it's not a bad place to be. Especially, and if at worst he becomes a spot-up shooter and he hits 7 threes and ties a rookie record and, that's what they need. The Lakers have always had an issue with shooting since LeBron's got there, and he solves that. So huge pickup for them. I think it turns them into true contenders. And excited to see that team kind of mesh together and see what he looks like moving forward. And, maybe it gets some of these older guys a chance to get drafted a little higher than, or get drafted where they should as opposed to falling because of that age. But look, man, appreciate y'all. That's all we got today. As always, man, I appreciate y'all. Look, subscribe, check us out. We're on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. Subscribe, follow, comment, engage, man. And look, as always, appreciate y'all, and we'll see y'all next time.